I am PC Peri. Welcome to part 2 of the 24th Busiversary, Flying Focus Video Collective's annual look back at the weekly series.
And I'm Dan Handelman. In 1991, Flying Focus started producing TV shows at Portland Community Media, highlighting peace and social justice issues. Our tagline is using video as a tool for social change, voicing the voiceless. The video bus features speakers, protests, and other information you will not see on network TV.
Grab a notation device and take down the information you see on your screen. It will show up a few more times during the program.
Our phone numbers are 503-321-5051 and 503-239-7456.
And our email is ffvc@flyingfocus.org. Contact us if you'd like to be a member with or a supporter of Flying Focus. Now we'll open it back up to producers introducing clips from shows we produce between 2014, that would be November, and October of 2015.
Hello, I'm Alan Evans. I've been with Flying Focus for a few years, and I'd like to talk about a show that I did this year. Oregon gets 1/3 of its electricity from burning coal. Most of that power is imported from out of state. After 2020, all coal-sourced electricity will come from out of state, generated at coal-burning power plants in Montana, Wyoming, and Utah. It's time for Oregon to get off of coal, the dirtiest of all the fossil fuels. In November 2014, the Sierra Club, in coalition with other environmental groups, kicked off its Coal to Clean campaign. The ultimate goal, get Oregon off coal by 2030. Flying Focus was there at the kickoff event. PC Peri did the sound, and Dan Handelman assisted with the editing.
Boardman has a date for being off of coal. PGE owns a coal plant in eastern Oregon, in Boardman, and by 2020 it will stop burning coal. We also, a few years ago, we had 6 coal export terminals in the region proposed, 3 of them in Oregon, and we now have scared the investors away, or the state of Oregon has denied permits for all 3 of the terminals in Oregon, which is amazing, right? 34% of our power comes from coal.
Further, it has become clear that climate change is a moral issue, affecting the life on this planet as we know it. And it's a justice issue, because while all of us are going to suffer the effects of global warming, it is the poor and vulnerable who are most at risk. Well, here in Oregon, just to bring it home a little bit, average temperatures have risen 1.5 degrees since 1920. The rise in greenhouse gases has caused a reduced spring snowpack in the Cascades, which is down about 20%. This means we're going to have less water for drinking water, for fish, agriculture, wildlife, and hydropower during the relatively dry summer months.
The Pacific Northwest is really lucky and blessed to be flush with all these abundant renewable resources. We have the hydro system, of course. You saw from the previous slides that Laura showed us that that's the majority of our power. But other resources are also being developed in the region.
And here I will quote Vice President of Pacificor at our recent policy conference that Cub says, "We know how to do renewables. We know how to do energy efficiency. It's just a matter of time." What's the timeline? Well, if time is the only issue that we're dealing with, that's the easy part.
How to deal with wind turbines killing birds and bats and solar panels frying birds that fly over them.
When you think about endangered species and impacts of energy use, the number one threat to migratory birds is climate change. So when we look at the number one source of climate change, which is, air pollution and carbon emissions, and that comes from coal plants.
PC Peri here again, and Barb is going to tell us about something that I recorded on camera, and it was
a climate action ride.
Right.
Yeah, people start off downtown riding their bikes around to various places in downtown Portland that profit from destroying the climate. So it was the Climate Action Coalition.
That's what I was going to get
Right,
to.
and I thought they did a really good job of bringing various issues together, and we'll see some of that in these clips that are coming up.
Portland has been kind of branded as a city of sustainability. Portland did a lot of great things back in the 70s with Tom McCall as our governor to really move environmentalism forward, move bicycle-related infrastructure forward. And unfortunately, we've kind of fallen by the wayside, and Portland's gotten in the habit of just saying we're really green and not actually meaning it. And now we have this whole greenwashing industrial complex where PR firms, nonprofits, a lot of companies are actually greenwashing for the fossil fuel industry that is based right here in Portland. And we have a lot of climate profiteers here in Portland who say they're sustainable, and really it's just a marketing gimmick. And we want to point that out. We still are one of the most polluted cities in the country. We have many, many climate profiteers in the city. We are increasing our auto dependence every day, and we're trying to show that we could be moving forward in a more sustainable direction, and we've actually fallen behind a lot of major cities.
And then today you're showing your guys' support by, what are you guys going to do?
So we're going on a climate profiteer tour, a climate action ride that will visit local climate profiteers and tell them, hey, these people are operating in our city, and this is not something we want happening in our city.
I'm with an organization called Oregon Fair Trade Campaign. So the role that we're playing in the Climate Action Ride today is holding our members of Congress responsible for their votes in favor of the very undemocratic legislation, Fast Track, that allows trade deals like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that is a climate killer, to be pushed through Congress without going through the regular democratic checks and balances. It limits amendment, it limits debate, and there's no chance of any amendments to even the most egregious language, anti-climate language, anti-environment language.
We have an authority on Juneteenth and the event itself. So we're interspersing footage from each so it tells a story about what Juneteenth is.
Right, so Woody Broadnax, or
Yes.
Mr. Juneteenth,
Right.
it gives an explanation in the first clip about what Juneteenth is. And I have to say, after living in the neighborhood where Juneteenth has been celebrated for almost 20 years, I learned a lot from this show.
Oh, that's good.
And I think people will learn a lot from it.
Great.
And then there's a woman in the second clip who is actually at the Juneteenth celebration.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And I really like how in this program they brought out that we celebrate the 4th of July, but a lot of people weren't free yet during the 4th of July. So I thought that was really an important point. And hopefully someday we'll pass an Equal Rights Amendment for women, and then everybody will be free.
General Granger rode into Galveston on June 19, 1865, and declared that all slaves were freed. And he did not declare that to the slaves. He went to the slave masters and told those plantation owners, your slaves are free. Now you go and tell your slaves. And when that word went out of freedom, they began to leave home. That is, the slaves began to leave home to go different places and to declare to their family, I was a free man now. I can go where I want to go and I can be what I want to be, based on what was described in the Emancipation Proclamation.
Juneteenth is very prevalent for the African American community because it was when we were emancipated. So we celebrate this in behalf of the years that Black Americans have been out of slavery and trying to live a normal life like the rest of the world.
The 19th of June is significant not only to blacks but to whites and to every individual that is on this planet that calls themselves a part of humanity. It is not a black and white thing. It is a freedom thing.
Juneteenth to me is a beautiful celebration that reminds us of a continued struggle, starting with a triumph, one being the initial signing of the Emancipation Proclamation and then like the actual announcement and folks knowing that this life-changing incident had taken place, where it was the first step to freedom. Like, we were permitted to seek freedom for the first time in the United States as a race of black people. So the fact that we come out here every year and commemorate that event and remind ourselves and hopefully take steps and advances to move forward in building freedom for ourselves where we are now and the next generation, and to build bridges and not so many walls, so that like collectively, like I hope that at some point the Juneteenth celebration will be something that is cross-cultural, because even though it is a part of black history, it's a very deep part of American history and human history.
We're going to hear from Ashley Lucas talking about prison art, and what things did she have to say that we don't normally hear about?
Well, one of the things she talks about is how families are affected, which you don't really hear about, but there are an astounding number of people locked up in the United States, more than any other so-called developed nation. And there are a lot of people in those families that are being affected. So she talks some about that in the clip, and then she also shows some of the art from the prisoners, and some of it is just really awesome.
I realized that while I was in graduate school studying to get my PhD in theater, there were 2.3 million people locked up in this country. There are now 2.5 of us behind bars in the United States. We are locking up more people per capita in this country than anybody has in recorded world history, including slavery. There has been no other country to incarcerate its own people at these rates. And this is astounding, right? This is astounding that we are not talking about this all the time, and that I couldn't find anybody else who had family in prison. How did that make sense? I'd spent 8 or 9 years of my father's incarceration before I got to this point, thinking that I didn't know anybody else who had a loved one in prison. How could that be? So I decided to start telling everybody that my father was in prison for the ostensible purpose of writing a play about people who have family in prison, because I didn't know what to do about his incarceration, but I did know how to do theater. And theater was a thing that had gotten me through a lot of tough things in my life. And so it came to my rescue again. And I told people that I was going to do a documentary play, an interview-based play about people who had family in prison. And I had good intentions, but I had no idea how this thing would happen or where I would find people who had family in prison. So I just started telling everybody, told everybody I met. In classes, I would find some weird example, some way to tie in the fact that my father was in prison and I was going to write a play about this, and I was looking for other people who had family in prison. I'm from Texas, and we're very friendly, and if you were standing in line next to me at the grocery store and you struck up a conversation, I would talk to you, and if you asked what I did, I would say, well, I'm a playwright, and I'm writing a play about people who have family in prison, and my father's in prison, and I'm looking for other people to interview. And people came out of the woodwork like you would not believe. And it wasn't just that people said, oh, me too. It was that people said, that is my life, and nobody ever asked me what happened to my family. It is both a self-portrait and something that is really imaginative. This artist is showing himself lying on his bunk in prison, and that's what the bunks in Michigan prisons look like. I haven't seen one in an Oregon prison, but you're basically sleeping on a concrete slab with only a couple of inches of mattress when you're in a Michigan prison or in a lot of states in this country. And in a place like that, somebody was able to see and create this, which I think is an extraordinary gift to us all.
Leanne Cerbulo and Karen Gibson are on a program that we taped, I guess I taped it, called Black and Blue. And it was at PSU, where they are professors. And how did that come out? You edited.
I did, and it was a great program. They authored and got an award for an article about police community relations in North Portland.
Albina area?
The Albina area, exactly, from 64 to, I think, 85.
I see.
And it covered a lot of the history, which is pretty dismal as far as the cops are concerned. And they talked about how important it is to keep applying pressure on the cops. That's the only way change ever happens.
We saw that every attempt at reform was met with resistance by the police and often by the city, too. The intelligence unit during the 1960s and then later in the 1970s and 80s, the police union were used to try to bully activists that were trying to get reforms from the police. And city officials would often back down whenever there was any sort of backlash from officials within the Portland Police or from the Portland Police Union. And police reform was never a high priority for elected officials. It wasn't something that they would necessarily run for their council positions on. It was something that they had to take up because the community forced them to take these issues up. We also discovered that the most progress was made when there was outside pressure or oversight. So all those reforms that happened in the 1970s were really a result of the Probasco decree by having a court-ordered consent agreement take place. And even the U.S. Department of Justice coming to town, even though they didn't find a pattern and practice achievement of civil rights violations, and even though the United Nations never investigated that complaint, just having some sort of outside force force the city to take these issues seriously was very effective. And so when we look at police-community relations today, despite the fact that gentrification has occurred, despite the fact that African Americans are now more dispersed around the city, this notion of an internal colony is still relevant today. Many people still feel as though they're under occupation, and there remains this tension within the community between wanting public safety, yet fearing the police and fearing racial profiling. Politicians are the ones that we discovered in our study were the ones that actually have the power to make reforms. So they're the ones that also have the responsibility to make sure that these reforms take place. And it's when outside oversight happens that these politicians are actually held accountable, and that ensures that reform will happen. However, it takes community pressure to get there. So those reforms didn't kind of come out of nowhere. It came from people organizing and people mobilizing to try to make some sort of change.
Hi, I'm Dan Handelman again, and I'm back to talk about the third show I produced this year. I'm here with Chris Fuzell of 610 Visuals, who videoed a November 2014 forum featuring Pastor Robert White from Ferguson, Missouri, and a connected local panel talking about police issues here in Portland. And Chris, what do you remember about that?
Well, first off, let me say thank you for having me on your 24th anniversary show. I really appreciate it, and I always appreciate what you do. I felt like I needed to be at that and document that show because it was important to get information straight from the ground from somebody who's there and who deals with it on a daily basis instead of having to depend on our news networks, as you know how that goes. So it was super important that I be there and get that amongst other protests and demonstrations surrounding the non-verdict of Michael Brown. So I felt that it went really well. He was a very precise speaker and gave a lot of information to what people can do, what people are doing, and what people should be doing in the future. So
great.
I was very happy with it.
Thanks so much for taping that and letting us use the video.
Absolutely.
And in this clip, you're going to see Pastor White, a song from Marilyn Keller, and Pastor Leroy Haynes from the Albina Ministerial Alliance Coalition for Justice and Police Reform.
In the few days that I've been here in Portland, I've fallen in love with your city. I've fallen in love because not only the landscape that give us the different topography where we can be in the mountains one minute, rolling across a bridge the next, but more importantly, as I look into this audience, which is a representation of who you all are, I'm watching the unity of blacks and whites and Latino and gay and lesbian, male and female sitting together in unity. And if I can just say that as much as I've been asked to come and share with you all have touched my soul to the depths of it in the manner in which I cannot wait to go back to a city that is completely divided and share with St. Louis how far behind we are. As we talk about police brutality, the influx of coppers coming down on the people and the occupation of a neighborhood by tanks, the use of tear gas on domestic soil when we are illegal. It's illegal for us to use tear gas in international warfare. What has happened to our country? What has happened is that the people have conceded to the established power. Hold on,
Hold on, keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on.
One of the demands or points of the MA Coalition is to call for a special prosecutor in controversial cases like this. Because of the relationship between the police on the local level and the district attorney office, it is hard for the DA to be objective in controversial cases when it becomes an issue of prosecuting a police officer.
My fourth show contained most of the annual Hiroshima Day commemoration organized by Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility. This year was the 75th anniversary of the U.S. atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Some of the presentations this year, including a traditional Japanese dance, are not reflected in these clips, but you should get a flavor of what the event was like. Portland Taiko opened and closed the event with their energetic drumming. Michiko Kornhauser told of her personal experiences in the aftermath of the bombings and led a song for peace. Joe Enlet talked about nuclear testing in the Marshall Islands. Carol Erner recalled Portland's first Hiroshima Day in the early 1960s and tied it to today's concerns. And host Polo Catalani reads a letter from Hiroshima's mayor.
He managed to go to Hiroshima and walked all over the city, burning city, looking for his brother. Finally, towards the end of the day, he found his brother dead in a ditch. His body was so swollen, he almost didn't recognize his brother.
After the war ended in 1945, the Micronesian island of the Marshall Islands became a test site for nuclear and hydrogen bombs for the U.S. military. The United States conducted 67 nuclear explosive tests in the Marshall Islands between 1946 and 1958.
Let me read a part of the message from the mayor of Hiroshima. It's dated today, August 6, 2015. This is not the whole letter, but this is a part of it. Mayors for Peace, an organization whose membership now exceeds 6,700 cities, and which the city of Hiroshima presides over, will steadfastly promote the movement, stressing the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons and seeking to outlaw them.
I have faith because I believe in us, we the people. We have the resources inside it. And so do the people of Japan and Russia and Iran. They're pushing for this. So please, let's all wake up and not go to sleep again until we have no nuclear weapons and no more wars.
That brings us to the end of the 24th Busiversary. Thank you for joining us.
PC Peri back again. We started this group and this show to get information out to people who will make the world a better place. Knowledge is not power until you act on it.
People who'd like to volunteer with us or support us in any way, call 503-239-7456 or 503-321-5051 or write ffvc@flyingfocus.org. We're hoping that the variety of topics inspires you to pick up a camera and create video to inspire others.
Tune in or set your recorder to the same time slot next week, each week, for the Flying Focus Video Bus. See you next time.